Well, what do we have here today? It looks like after 7 years, the left has finally gotten what they want, a conviction from Donald Trump. However, just like the dog chasing the car, when they catch it, they really don't want it and don't know what to do with it. Okay, so what we're going to see today, of course, is some interesting takes by Maxine Waters and the folks over at the Daily Joe. However, before we begin, please like and comment this video so we can break through the algorithms. Let's check it out.
I am going to spend some time with the criminal justice system, with the justice system, asking them, tell us what's going on with the domestic terrorists. Are they preparing a civil war against us? Should we be concerned about our safety? What is he doing with this divisive language? It is dangerous, and we're going to have to make sure that we understand that we're not at risk with this man talking in the way that he's doing.
Yes, that was anti-Maxine Waters calling basically all Trump supporters domestic terrorists. And we have to look into them because are they planning another insurrection? Is a civil war coming? Well, I don't know, Maxine. When you start prosecuting your political opponents, what does that lead to? But of course, she doesn't think that the Antifa and BLM riots, oh, that wasn't domestic terrorism at all. It's just those rowdy Trump supporters. And don't forget, Maxine Waters is the same lady that called for everyone to get up in the face of all of her political opponents, if you remember this.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
And also, let's remember, those comments were made before people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Mitch McConnell, of course, were accosted in restaurants, right? They were actually kicked out of those places, people screaming in their faces because you can't stand to be around people that even have a different belief system than you. That, of course, is what the left does. And also, don't forget, all the way back in 2015, 2016, at the Trump rallies, when the left showed up in force, chasing down and accosting and beating, physically assaulting all of the people who dared to show up to the Trump rallies, all right? But don't mention any of that. But this, of course, is what the radical left always does. But also after Trump's historic conviction, we also have the first rounds of polling coming out. Let's see this discussed by Morning Joe.
Since the conviction Thursday, the RNC says the committee and campaign have raised $70 million online, a massive haul.
There's no doubt that this verdict has actually brought unifying our party.
But multiple polls this weekend find majorities of Americans agreeing with the guilty verdict, with the Biden-Trump race overall remaining deadlocked, as it's been for months. Most top Republicans falling in line behind the presumptive GOP nominee.
We have to fight back, and we will, with everything in our arsenal. But we do that within the confines of the rule of law.
As President Biden himself issues a warning about GOP rhetoric.
And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
I completely agree with the president. I will say, words do matter. And I noticed something different with what Mike Johnson said compared to Donald Trump. Donald Trump says we're at the breaking point. And Mike Johnson there said we must fight back. But he said we must fight back within the confines of the rule of law. Well, that's important. That's important. That's like, it's all right for us to say we have to fight politically at the ballot box, et cetera, et cetera. That's how politicians have always spoken until we get to Donald Trump, who talks about, telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by, or saying, come to Washington on January 6th, it will be wild, are saying, Lawrence O'Donnell, that we are at a, quote, breaking point. Coded language for a man who started the worst riot, political riot in American history in Washington, D.C. since the Civil War.
Before we continue, I do want to mention that Joe Biden is ruining the economy. Inflation is up and he is devaluing our currency. So what can you do to protect your dollar? You can go to Genesis Gold Group and turn your 401k or IRA into a gold-backed retirement account. Get back on that gold standard and protect your money. Now, to do this, of course, just go to angryteachergold.com or call 1-800-200-4653 to protect your money. And of course, Genesis Gold Group is a faith-based, America First organization, so you can be assured you're not investing with a woke company. Let's get back to it. First, I find it ironic that Scarborough is like, yeah, you have to beat your political opponents at the ballot box. Exactly. Traditionally, that's what it's been. But the Biden administration has decided to, of course, get into cahoots with all of these Soros-funded DAs and bring charges against Donald Trump so they can beat him not at the ballot box, but, of course, through the law system, bringing about, of course, an unprecedented amount of lawfare. And then, of course, he says Donald Trump is responsible for the largest political riots. Right? We're getting away from the word insurrection now because, of course, that's a specific charge that Donald Trump has not been charged with nor convicted of. However, of course, the so-called riots on January 6th, could those have been possibly instigated by, I don't know, FBI plans, allegedly? And of course, they always tend to forget the part where Trump said, we're going to go peacefully and patriotically make our voices heard, because there's a whole lot of people out there who saw shenanigans that did in fact take place on election day back in 2020. But the polls, of course, right? The left is really ecstatic because they have a couple of polls done by CBS and ABC, right? That show that, oh, Donald Trump has lost a step ever since his conviction. However, we can come over here to Twitter, we can see that, yes, Donald Trump, according to Harris Forbes poll, shows that he's actually gained a point post-conviction. Okay, so we're going to see some polling that's all over the place. I'm not expecting anything really reliable for a week. Of course, I will keep you informed as soon as something pops up, but it looks like, yes, Donald Trump has in fact gained since his conviction, depending on which poll you look at. And I personally would probably trust this one as opposed to one done by ABC or CBS, right? Just my personal opinion on all that. Of course, this growth in popularity is not unprecedented for Donald Trump. Whenever something happens, he seems to gain momentum. And in this case, if we look over here, Trump has actually joined TikTok, right? And he's actually got more campaign followers than the Biden campaign in less than 24 hours, all right? So this, of course, is truly amazing. Now, I don't like TikTok per se. I'm not sure if I like this bill that the Congress just passed in terms of forcing ownership onto American companies, but I definitely don't agree with a communist foreign entity having a huge influence on our youth. So probably a good thing. We'll have to dig into that a little bit more, maybe in a later video. But for now, of course, his first post over here on TikTok looks like a doozy. Let's go ahead and check it out.
The president is now on TikTok. It's my honor.
All right, so that, of course, was President Trump's first TikTok video, and it was covering basically his appearance at the UFC most recently on Saturday night over in New Jersey. All right, the crowd was going wild when he walked in. Whenever they showed him on the big screen, they were just going nuts, right? So the enthusiasm level, of course, is through the roof, and this always happens for Donald Trump. They attack, they smear, they besmirch, and he becomes more popular because they are so blatant in their TDS, in their hatred of their opposition. And of course, as history shows, that's what the socialist communist left always does. They have to throw their opposition in jail or execute them, because otherwise no one would go for this garbage. Now, the last thing I want to mention, of course, is a little tidbit here from Rand Paul, right? He's one of the few politicians I actually respect. Okay, let's go ahead and check this out on Fox News.
Your expectation is that President Trump could still win the election despite what has taken place. What is your reaction to the conviction and the guilty conviction?
You know, a sad day in America, and what I worry about is something even bigger than Donald Trump. I worry about strife. I worry about war in the streets. I worry about 50% of the public believing that the court system will be used against them. You know, once upon a time it was because of the color of your skin, now because of the shade of your ideology. I worry about that, and I worry when half the country thinks they won't be treated fairly, what happens and how people react. If you look at records violations and you look at Hillary Clinton, $8 million expense, and they slapped her on the wrist because she got an $8,000 fine, and that's actually probably appropriate, some kind of fine for mislabeling things. But there's a real question whether it is mislabeled. Was it a legal expense? Sounds like it was a legal expense. All non-disclosure agreements, I believe, are legal expenses. I'm guessing there are hundreds of them in New York City as we speak, and my guess is not one of them have ever been taken to court. I think Donald Trump is the only person ever prosecuted for this particular crime.
So true, right? And I love how he brings up Hillary Clinton. Millions of dollars spent and mislabeled. And what happened? Well, she was fined a few $1,000s. Oh, but Trump, oh, you have to drag him into the court system. You have to convict him and possibly throw him in jail. We'll find that out in a couple of weeks, right? But the clear two different standards of justice, supposedly, between the two parties is palpable. And everyone can see that this is blatant, open, obvious lawfare against Donald Trump. And so as usual, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay safe out there, people, because they're coming after you.